It's been a privilege to be with you today. Initially, Vice President Sandra Rogers was invited, and she really wanted to take it, but I've got the football game on. I've got to turn it off. But she's on the General Reef Society board and had to be there for the women's meetings today and asked if I would represent her. So I bring you her greetings along with mine. I was asked by Professor Merkley last night if I was going to attend the entire conference, and I said, well, I'm trying to balance this out. I've just returned from the Middle East, and my wife has a long honey-do list. I've got a football game, and I'm not sure. Well, it made the decision very easy this morning when it was raining. So I got up and came, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the conference with you. It's also a significant mark for me. I just passed my 50-year anniversary of full-time employment at BYU. And next month I'll be 76, so I have decided to retire at the end of the semester. But I have been personally involved with China for 35 years. And so when I was asked to make some closing remarks, I thought, how do you take 35 years and fit it into 6 to 8 minutes? But I didn't worry about it. I only had 6 to 8 minutes. And my secretary said to me yesterday, anything I can do for you? I said, no. I said, I've only got 6 to 8 minutes, so I can, my hard part is cutting it down to what I want to say. And I came and listened this morning. I thought, I'm embarrassed. I've got to go back and organize better. So during the lunch hour, and mainly to try and put 40 minutes into 8 minutes, this is how we're going to go. So in my 35 years of taking BYU to China and bringing China to BYU, these are the categories, and we'll go through them in more detail. China scholarship programs that I've managed over the years, the BYU performance tours since 1979, hosting China ambassadors or Chinese ambassadors to the U.S. at BYU, BYU's liaison with the Chinese embassy in D.C. and the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Education, and Culture, hosting of Chinese VIPs and delegations to BYU, and having BYU designate China as a top priority country back in 1998. So let's go on next. BYU liaison with the Chinese ministry in D.C. This is a picture that was taken when young ambassadors were there last. This was Madam Meng, who was the Deputy Minister of Culture. She decided she wanted her daughter to come to BYU. And so I became involved with both the embassy and the ministry back in 2005. And it created a very nice relationship where the ministry began hosting all of our performance groups. And so it's very nice. We were doing it before that through another smaller agency, Chinese Friendship, but this became more prestige. And it started also that we became opening numbers in Meet in Beijing Arts Festival. So this is on one occasion with Madam Meng and with President Samuelson, where he was being awarded and recognized for the contributions BYU has given to China. Next. Chinese scholarship programs. That's for where it really started for me. Because in 1983, Elder Maxwell went to China with the folk dancers. He met with Deputy Premier Li Peng, and who was also the Minister of Education, although they call it the Commission of Education at that time. And with that, Elder Maxwell offered 10 scholarships for Chinese students selected through the Ministry of Education to come to BYU. So I worked with the ministry in the selection of the students and then bringing them to BYU. But this was our first Chinese student scholarship to BYU in 1982. His name is Suga, and for those of you who went to graduation last April, you would recognize that he was the one who received the honorary degree from BYU. So for me, seeing one of our students go through being at BYU, receiving a master's degree at BYU, receiving a doctoral degree at BYU, doing his postdoc in Harvard, going back to China, becoming recognized as one of the most promising young intellectuals in China, in writing his book, which came out of his thesis on China-U.S. relationships as it regarding Taiwan. And it became a must-read suggested by the Premier, and it became a required read in the Institute of Foreign Ministry for all diplomats that were being trained. He became a vice president there. Then he came to the United States as minister counselor in the embassy as a diplomat, and he was the liaison between the U.S. government and the Chinese government on the working operations. Now, the person to whom he reported each day was an individual I had known, and two of his nieces and one of his nephews all came to BYU and graduated at BYU. So I wrote to him and said, when Suga was appointed, you really did a nice job in whom you selected to be your minister counselor. He wrote back and said, Suga is both of our shining stars. He's the one that provides the daily report to me that I use to brief the foreign minister. Then Suga was appointed as an ambassador to South America, later an ambassador to Europe, and then he was going to retire, but the foreign minister asked him to stay as a personal advisor to him. And a year ago, April, he was appointed to be the president of their think tank institute for the foreign ministry. So you can see why it's been so exciting over these years to be engaged in scholarship programs, in bringing students here to BYU, in following their lives and seeing their accomplishments. Next. Of course, BYU performance tours since 1979, and that's really where things started. And this is the last time, our last group to go, a year ago, University Singers. And of course, we always get pictures that designate where we are. And they gave wonderful concerts and fully appreciated. My role in hosting Chinese ambassadors to the U.S. at the church in BYU. Since 1990, I have hosted all but one Chinese ambassador to the United States here at BYU. The one got reposted early, and so he planned to come, but the time didn't play out to us. But for those of you who were here 2 years ago, we had the current young ambassador, Ambassador Choi. And with him, it was interesting because I introduced him at a business luncheon in Salt Lake. So in doing my homework, I went in and did a Google search, found things on him, but I found an interview. And of course, he was from a prosperous home when the revolution took place and was sent up on a farm in northern China next to the Mongolian border. And one of the interviews that he had, the host asked him, did you, when you were on the farm up in northern China, ever anticipate that someday you would be the Chinese ambassador to the United States? The answer is obvious, no. But I used that to lead into what he has accomplished in his background. And I said, we talk about the American dream. Well, let's talk about the Chinese dream. And made reference to this, and then I could take him through what he had done since that time. Well, when he got up to speak, he said, what Dr. Peterson said is correct. At that time, I never dreamed I would ever come to the United States as the Chinese ambassador to the U.S. But I did have a dream of coming to Utah and visiting BYU. He said, in 1979, the BYU Young Ambassadors, through television on CCTV, introduced Western culture to me. And that made such an impression that I said in my heart, someday I want to visit BYU and see the Young Ambassadors in person. And he did that 2 years ago. No, it was last year, excuse me, just last October. And when he spoke here at BYU, he started out with that story. Here's a picture, of course, with the ambassador, with Elder Nelson. It was an interesting situation on that because there's really a sensitivity about the Chinese ambassador visiting church headquarters. But he didn't mind visiting with a church leader. And so we made arrangements that when the ambassador came on to Temple Square, we went in the visitor center, and Elder Nelson and Elder Elder Gong were waiting, and we had a wonderful exchange in which Elder Nelson started out for the first 5 minutes speaking Chinese and then giving his background. Next, hosting delegations and the Chinese VIPs. This was really a special one. This individual is the Communist Party leader for the position equivalent to the foreign minister. And he visited Utah. We had our dancers go up, our young ambassadors go up and perform for him. And then he presented me with this painting at the conclusion. So I've had any VIP Chinese delegates where they're really working with the president and others, then I pick up the hosting at BYU and sometimes with the church in making those arrangements. Next. This is one that I'm touched by, as you can see. Now really, this picture was taken at a concert in Beijing where two of the former ambassadors came to the concert to be able to see me. And when I came in to meet with them, my response was, well, in 1997, I was knighted by the King of Norway. And President Bateman said, Pete, can you do for other countries what you've done with the relationship between BYU and Norway? And I facetiously said, sure, if you'll give me $1 million endowment that I can work with. And he said, give me a proposal and give me the countries that you would propose. And China was number 1 on that list. We selected only 3. China remains the most important to us in our relationships. We continue to encourage the academic community to engage with China, as long as we go through proper channels and approvals. But with that, I'm really pleased that we were able to identify then China at that time as our top priority country to reach out to and engage with. Next. Well, the next BYU emphasis for China. Target date, 2019. Why? That's the 40th year anniversary of young ambassadors going to China. This past May, President Worthen and Vice President Rogers and Jeff Ringer went to China, and I set up meetings with the Deputy Minister of Education and with the President and CEO of CAEG, China Arts and Education Group, which is the umbrella group over all of the other performing organizations. And they are very excited about the 40th anniversary. But in order for us to go, we've got to put together a spectacular show. And so we're now evaluating how to do it, if we can do it, what needs to go there that not only reflects on the past 40 years, that projects the next 40 years. And so we've got a real task to put that together, but with an invitation that includes them sending CCTV to BYU again, they've done it before, to do a 90-minute documentary. A few years ago, we did it, and CCTV came over. They did the 90-minute documentation. They showed it on television, CCTV, 3 times in 24 hours on the first day the young ambassadors performed in China on that trip. So we're looking at a trip to China for that. But with it, when President Worthen met with the Deputy Prime Minister of Education, the Deputy Prime Minister said, when BYU first came to China, you really became apparent to us. We were aware of you. We saw the contributions you're making. But as time has gone on, BYU has faded. And if you want our attention, you've got to do a new initiative that really focus on the educational mission of BYU with China. So the president now has Jeff Ringer heading up a brainstorming group, which will collect many of you who are here who have Chinese, I'm talking professor level, background, and the Chinese experts in the departments to put together or identify, or to have by November 15th, a proposal to the president on several alternatives that we might look at for 2019. So when the president goes, he has something new to present. Next. Now, congratulations on the conference planners. I really enjoyed being with you. I hope you've gained as much as I have. New information, new perspectives, new commitments, new contacts, and additional commitment to BYU's relationship to China and China's relationship to BYU. Thank you for being here.